I still remember the clinking sound before the silence, the ring of glass meeting glass, laughter spilling into the candlelight, and my husband's voice rising above the hum of the restaurant. "To my work wife," he said, grinning, lifting his glass toward the woman sitting across from him. The words floated lightly through the air, dressed as a joke, but jokes, I've learned, are where truth hides most comfortably. The restaurant was elegant, all soft lighting and polished silver, the kind of place people chose when they wanted to look like they belonged somewhere better than themselves. I had booked it weeks in advance, his promotion dinner, his colleagues, the perfect evening to celebrate years of shared ambition. I'd even arranged the menu, picked the wine he liked best. It was supposed to be our night. But as his colleagues laughed at the toast, as the woman next to him, Ava, her name, blushed and touched his arm, something in the air shifted. I saw it in the way her hand lingered too long, in the way his eyes met hers when he thought I wasn't looking. It wasn't just familiarity, it was ownership. He raised his glass higher. "She keeps me sane," he said, and the table erupted in knowing laughter. My own smile felt heavy, artificial. If you've ever sat in a room full of people laughing at something that breaks you, tell me where you're listening from, because that's the sound humiliation makes. It's polite, well-dressed, and it never raises its voice. The waiter poured more wine. I excused myself to the restroom, where I leaned against the marble counter and looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection stared back, composed, flawless, a woman built for presentation. But behind the calm was a single sharp thought. I paid for this. When I returned to the table, the plates were being cleared, the laughter louder now. Eva was telling a story, something about a late night at the office, an inside joke that excluded me entirely. He laughed harder than I'd heard him laugh in months. His hand brushed hers under the table. I saw it in the angle of their shoulders. My pulse slowed, not from shock, but from recognition. This wasn't new. It was simply louder now, visible under chandeliers instead of shadows. Dessert came and went. When the bill arrived, the waiter placed it beside me with practiced discretion. My name, in embossed print, smiled from the reservation tag at the top. The amount was obscene, 5 figures of wine, seafood, and indulgence, all signed under the credit card I had used to book it. I stared at it for a moment before slipping my card into the folder. No one noticed. When we got home, he was still glowing with the energy of the night. "That went well," he said, loosening his tie. "Eva's great with people, isn't she?" "She is," I said evenly. "You looked happy," he smiled, missing the weight behind my tone. "It's just work, you know. Don't overthink it." I didn't answer. Overthinking in his language meant noticing what he hoped would stay invisible. He kissed my cheek and went to shower, humming softly, the scent of expensive wine lingering on his breath. I sat at the dining table, the bill unfolded in front of me, the ink still fresh where I had signed. Each number on that page felt like a sentence written against me. But then I saw something small, almost unnoticeable. The tip, rounded neatly, not in his handwriting but hers. The same elegant loop she used when signing company memos I'd seen him bring home. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into a file. Evidence begins in moments like these, quiet, unannounced, dressed as routine. The next morning I made him breakfast. He kissed me on the forehead before leaving, his phone buzzing with a message from a name I didn't need to read. I stood by the window and watched him drive away, his taillights vanishing into daylight. Then I picked up my phone and called the bank. By noon, I had access to every joint statement, every transaction, every charge he had tried to hide beneath convenience. My name was on every one of them. Every dinner, every trip, every bottle of wine. It was all mine. My card, my funds, my unknowing signature. That evening, as I poured myself a glass of wine, I realized something simple and terrifying. He hadn't just used my money. He'd used my dignity to pay for his illusion. The receipt from that dinner lay beside me on the counter, smooth and white under the kitchen light. I ran my thumb along its edge, the ink smudging slightly. Somewhere in that small act of friction, I found my next decision. I wouldn't confront him with shouting. I wouldn't demand confession. I would make truth cost him what it had cost me, quietly, elegantly, and in full. The next morning, the house felt quieter than usual. The clinking of dishes, the soft hum of the coffee machine, everything sounded rehearsed. part of a routine that suddenly felt like someone else's life. My husband kissed me goodbye, said he'd be home late, and left with the same confidence of a man who thought his secrets were invisible. I waited until I heard the car fade into the distance before I opened my laptop. The bank statements lay spread across the screen like an autopsy of our marriage, line after line of expenses, all bearing my name. Boutique hotels, gift stores I'd never visited, meals for two at restaurants I'd never seen. It wasn't the amounts that hurt. It was the precision. Every charge was small enough to hide, but frequent enough to form a pattern. Betrayal, it seemed, didn't arrive in explosions. It dripped in decimals. I started printing them, one by one, stacking them neatly on the table. The sound of paper feeding through the printer was steady, almost rhythmic, as if the house itself was keeping count. By the 5th page, the rhythm began to feel like breathing again. Proof, when it arrives quietly, has its own kind of mercy. I created folders, dates, locations, amounts. I cross-checked them with his calendar, his emails, the photos he'd posted of team dinners. Eva's name appeared often enough to stop feeling like coincidence. Conference, Boston. One note read beside a hotel charge. I remembered that week. He'd told me the company couldn't afford to bring spouses. The irony was almost graceful. Later that day, I visited the bank. The clerk, polite but curious, printed copies of older statements. Big spender, she joked. I smiled faintly. Not as much as he thinks. That evening, I placed everything into a single leather file. The weight of it surprised me. Years of quiet obedience condensed into paper and ink. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply understood. He hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He'd written his betrayal into ledgers. And numbers, unlike people, don't lie. That night, I made dinner as usual. He walked in smiling, kissed me lightly on the cheek, and said, "Long day." I poured him wine and asked how the work wife was doing. He laughed, almost relieved by the familiarity of my tone. "Still the same," he said. "You know how people tease?" I nodded, placing the glass in front of him. "I do," I said softly. "People do love jokes." He didn't notice the edge beneath my words. The evening unfolded like habit. The dishes clinked, the wine lowered, the laughter practiced. But beneath the small talk, I was taking notes again. Timing, tone, patterns. You don't destroy arrogance by matching its volume. You dismantle it with observation. Later, when he fell asleep on the couch, I stood by the window, the city lights reflected in the glass. I could see both of us in the reflection, him resting carelessly, me standing still, silent, awake. That was the moment I realized I didn't want confrontation. I wanted precision. Over the next week, I began tracking everything. He was careless with time, but I wasn't. Every meeting became a mark on my timeline. Every expense a thread I traced to its origin. I followed the pattern until it led to a single recurring charge, an upscale wine bar downtown, always on Thursdays, always under my card. That Thursday I went there. The hostess smiled politely when I gave my name. "Reservation for two?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and then added, "but I'll only stay for one drink." From across the room, I saw him, his hand already resting on the back of her chair, his laughter rehearsed, the same one I'd heard for years. Ava looked exactly as I imagined, perfectly understated, the kind of woman who believed elegance excused cruelty. I didn't interrupt. I didn't want to make a scene. I wanted to witness truth. I sat at the bar, ordered a glass of wine, and watched as he toasted her with the same gesture he once used with me. The rhythm was identical. The words were recycled. When the bill came, the waiter walked straight to their table, but I saw it before they did. The charge went to the same card, my card. He hadn't even changed that detail. I almost laughed. Arrogance, it seems, makes people forget who's paying for their illusions. I left before he saw me. Outside, the air was crisp, the streetlights flickering against the wet pavement. I walked slowly, feeling neither heartbreak nor anger, just an odd clarity. He thought deceit made him powerful, but all it really did was make him predictable. That night, I placed the latest receipt with the others. The folder was complete now. Everything neatly ordered, time-stamped, undeniable. I closed it and wrote one word across the cover: balance. When he came home, I pretended to be asleep. He kissed my forehead, whispered, "Good night," and turned off the light. I waited until his breathing evened, then whispered softly into the dark, "You'll pay for what you charged." The irony wasn't lost on me. Justice, I decided, would arrive exactly the way his betrayal had, disguised as routine, perfectly timed, and impossible to dispute. The morning after the wine bar felt like the quiet before a confession. The sunlight touched the curtains delicately, as if it, too, understood the weight of what I knew. He was already gone by the time I came downstairs, his cup on the counter, his tie missing from its usual hook. I poured myself coffee and stared at the folder lying open on the table. Every sheet, every number, every receipt was a fragment of a truth I had paid for. By then I had stopped asking why. Betrayal never has one reason. It multiplies quietly, like interest. I wanted something else now. Not revenge, not even justice. I wanted acknowledgement, the kind that doesn't need words. I spent the next few days arranging things with precision. I contacted the restaurant manager where his promotion dinner had been held. My voice stayed calm, professional. "I'd like to make a reservation," I said. "Same table as before. For 6. The manager recognized my name immediately, perhaps from the last bill that still glowed under my signature. "Of course, Mrs. Bennett," he said warmly. "We'd be honored." That night, I sat across from my reflection at the vanity, applying lipstick like armor. My movements were unhurried, my thoughts clean. I didn't need to look beautiful. I needed to look finished. There's a kind of calm that comes only when the storm stops mattering. He arrived home late, loosened his collar, kissed my cheek distractedly. "You're dressed up," he said. "I made dinner reservations," I replied. "It's been a while since we went out." He looked surprised, maybe a little guilty. "Tonight?" "Yes," I said, smiling. "Tonight." He agreed, because men like him always do when they think the story still belongs to them. The restaurant was exactly as I remembered. Dim lighting, violins humming softly, the faint scent of citrus and money. The hostess greeted us by name and led us to the same table. His confusion was almost imperceptible, but I saw the flicker in his eyes when he realized. I placed my clutch neatly on the table. "Déjà vu?" I said lightly. "We ordered wine." He was restless, glancing at his phone, probably expecting a message that wouldn't come. I had made sure of that. Ava was out of reach tonight, her company email suspended, courtesy of a quiet call to HR. They would both learn how silence feels when it turns inward. He tried to make small talk. "You seem different lately," he said, sipping his drink. "I am," I answered. "I've been paying attention." The waiter arrived, elegant and discreet. I noticed the faint recognition in his eyes as he placed the menus down. The same waiter who had handed me the bill weeks ago. "It's good to have you back, Mrs. Bennett," he said. I smiled softly. "It's good to close circles." Dinner unfolded like a performance we both knew was ending. I spoke about the past, about how we used to share ideas, dreams, laughter. He nodded, pretending nostalgia. Every word was a mirror I held up for him to see what he'd broken. When dessert arrived, I set my fork down and looked directly at him. "Do you remember the last time we sat here?" I asked. He hesitated, uneasy. "Of course. It was my promotion dinner." "Your promotion," I repeated, tasting the word. "The one I paid for, along with every dinner, every bottle, every trip you ever shared with her." His hand froze midair. "What are you talking about?" I opened the clutch and slid the folder across the table. Receipts, statements, printed emails, all neatly arranged. He didn't reach for it. He just stared. "Go on," I said gently. "You'll recognize her signature on a few of them. She's quite consistent." His mouth opened, then closed again. The waiter passed by quietly, pretending not to hear. I continued, calm and measured. "You see, I realized something important. You can hide an affair, you can hide your guilt, but you can't hide math." He exhaled sharply, a sound between disbelief and fear. "You went through my accounts?" "Our accounts," I corrected. "Though I suppose you forgot the our part when you used them." The silence that followed stretched, heavy and fragile. He looked around, suddenly aware of the quiet attention from nearby tables. His voice dropped to a whisper. "What do you want?" I leaned back slightly, studying him. "Nothing you can give." The waiter returned with the check, placed it delicately between us. My name gleamed at the top again. He reached for his wallet automatically, but I placed my hand over the folder. Not this time, I said. The bill's in your name tonight. His expression flickered from confusion to realization. I had already transferred our joint funds into separate accounts that morning, mine secured, his frozen pending investigation. I had filed the report under fraudulent misuse of shared finances. Numbers, as always, didn't lie. He pushed his chair back abruptly, his breath shallow. You planned this? Yes, I said. I planned this the moment you made a toast with my money. He stood, but his confidence was gone. The waiter waited patiently for his card. I didn't move. I simply watched, silent, until the transaction was complete. When it was over, I thanked the waiter, gathered my clutch, and walked toward the exit without looking back. Behind me, the soft sound of the violin filled the silence he left behind. Outside, the night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. I walked slowly toward the car, the streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. For the first time in years, I felt weightless, not because I'd won, but because I'd finished. Justice hadn't shouted. It had whispered, elegantly, and he'd heard it where it hurt most, in the balance he thought he controlled. The next morning arrived without ceremony. The house felt hollow, though everything was still in its place. The neat arrangement of books, the scent of his cologne clinging faintly to the hallway. But the silence was no longer oppressive. It was space, wide-earned, necessary. He hadn't come home the night before. I didn't expect him to. Some truths don't allow return. I sat at the dining table where we used to share breakfast and placed the final receipt beside the stack of papers. The ink had begun to fade slightly, but the name printed at the top remained clear. His. It was strange how one shift, a single change of ownership, could turn humiliation into equilibrium. I had spent years paying for things that cost me more than money. Now, at last, the balance had adjusted. By mid-morning, the calls began. First from his office. Polite confusion about account freezes and unauthorized transactions. Then from him. I didn't answer either. Justice, I decided, should unfold in silence. Around noon, a knock at the door broke the stillness. It was the courier. An envelope, heavy, sealed with the name of our bank embossed in silver. Inside was confirmation of the transfer I'd requested. Every cent I'd earned, saved, or been owed had been redirected into my personal account. Clean separation, no trace of shared debt. I ran my thumb over the embossed logo, the texture sharp against my skin. Freedom, it turned out, had paperwork. That afternoon, I went to the firm where he worked. The receptionist's smile wavered when she saw me. He's not in, she said softly, though we both knew he was. I handed her a thin envelope addressed to him, and another, smaller one marked for HR. Inside were the documents, his receipts, the expense reports, the proof that business dinners were anything but. The same evidence he'd once used to impress his superiors would now undo him in the same setting. Please make sure he gets these before end of day, I said. She nodded, her eyes flicking to the name on the envelope before looking away. I could feel the shift already beginning, the slow ripple of consequence spreading through the air like ink in water. When I stepped outside, the city felt different, sharper, more alive. I hadn't realized how much of it I'd stopped seeing while orbiting around his deceit. The noise, the motion, even the chill of the wind against my face felt like proof that I still existed beyond him. I walked without destination, letting the rhythm of my steps carry me forward. By evening, he called again. This time I answered. His voice was raw, the practiced smoothness gone. You've ruined me, he said, not as accusation but as disbelief. No, I replied quietly. You did that when you mistook me for someone who wouldn't notice. He breathed hard on the other end, the sound jagged and uneven. Do you think this makes you right? I don't need to be right, I said. I just need to be done. A long pause stretched between us, the kind that carries everything unsaid. Then softly he said, She's gone. I closed my eyes for a moment. They always are when the bill arrives, I murmured. He didn't speak again. The call ended with the faint sound of his breath catching. Defeat, not anger. I set the phone down and poured myself a glass of wine. The same bottle he had chosen that night. The irony was almost elegant. Later, I opened the balcony doors and let the cool air drift through the room. The city lights below shimmered like scattered reflections, each one small, but together, unignorable. I thought about how long I'd lived in the shadows of other people's comforts, how often I'd been the invisible benefactor behind someone else's applause. That part of me had gone quiet now. The next morning, a notice appeared in the news feed: corporate misconduct under investigation, financial discrepancies tied to personal misuse of funds. His name wasn't printed yet, but I recognized the phrasing, the tone. It was the beginning. He would deny it, of course, and others would whisper. But the truth, once revealed, doesn't shrink back into silence. That night, I sat alone at the same table where his toast had once humiliated me. I unfolded the first receipt, the one that started it all, and laid it flat under the lamp. The numbers were still there, permanent, factual, impartial. I traced my finger along the bottom where my name used to be and smiled. The ink that once symbolized betrayal now marked the end of it. I picked up the pen and crossed it out. Then carefully, in slow, deliberate letters, I wrote his name instead. For a moment, I just stared at it. The symmetry, the justice, the simplicity of truth written plainly where it belonged. Then I folded the paper neatly, placed it back in the folder, and set it aside. Outside, the rain began to fall, soft against the windows, steady and cleansing. I watched it blur the city lights into something almost beautiful. He would be facing the noise of his choices now, the kind of chaos that never ends quickly. But I wasn't waiting anymore. When I turned off the lamp, the reflection in the window looked different. My face wasn't framed by worry or waiting. It was framed by stillness. The kind that comes after balance is restored. The week after everything unfolded passed like a soft, unannounced ending. No sudden relief, no grand applause, just the quiet return of my own rhythm. The headlines grew bolder each day, but I didn't read them. His company's statement was predictable. An internal review, financial irregularities, administrative leave. They used words designed to sound clean, words that avoided what they really meant. He'd been caught. The house, once heavy with his presence, began to breathe again. I moved through it with deliberate calm, closing drawers, packing boxes, letting go of the small, ordinary remnants of a life that no longer felt like mine. His watch lay on the nightstand where he'd left it. It had stopped at 12:43, as if even time refused to move forward for him. I didn't take it with me. Some things are better left to rust. One morning, as the first light filtered through the curtains, I made coffee and opened the balcony doors. The air carried the faint scent of rain and something distant, possibility. I thought about how strange it was to feel both empty and free, how the same silence that once suffocated now soothed. Freedom, I realized, doesn't arrive loudly. It comes as quiet acceptance that you survived something you didn't deserve. I finalized the paperwork for the separation, the ink drying evenly under my hand. There was no anger left in it, only completion. My lawyer asked if I wanted to pursue damages. I shook my head. No, I said. He's already paid. That afternoon, I visited the restaurant one last time. The same soft music played. The same scent of lemon and wine lingered in the air. The manager recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Bennett," he said cautiously, "it's good to see you again." "Just a table for one," I replied. He smiled, almost relieved. Of course. I sat at the same table. The light fell differently this time, warmer somehow. I ordered a single glass of wine, the same bottle he had once chosen, and when it arrived, I raised it quietly. Not to anyone, not to victory, but to the calm that follows truth. The waiter placed the bill beside me, but I didn't look at it. "Charge it to my account," I said. The words came easily, but this time they didn't carry weight. I paid for peace now, not proof. When I stepped outside, the evening light was soft, brushing against the street in gold and gray. The world hadn't changed, but I had. Every sound, the hum of traffic, the distant laughter of strangers, felt new, unfiltered. I walked toward the river, where the city lights shimmered across the water like broken reflections trying to reassemble. For years, I had lived trying to fix what was already fractured. Now I let it stay that way. Some things don't need to return to how they were. They just need to stop hurting. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. A message from an unknown number. I'm sorry. No name, but none was needed. I deleted it without opening the thread. Forgiveness, I decided, wasn't something he could request. It was something I would give myself, slowly, in moments like this. The sky deepened into twilight. I slipped off my heels, holding them in one hand as I walked barefoot along the edge of the promenade. The ground was cool against my skin, grounding, real. Somewhere behind me, the city continued its noise. Restaurants opening, glasses clinking, people laughing. Life, undisturbed by the quiet revolutions that end and begin inside ordinary souls. I thought of all the times I'd kept myself small, polite, waiting to be acknowledged. How foolish that seemed now. I reached the end of the walkway and stopped, watching the river flow steady beneath the bridge lights. The current moved without hesitation, forward always. That was what I wanted my life to be now. Not loud, not triumphant, just honest movement. I took one last deep breath, the air cool and clean, and whispered to the wind, "It's enough." The water caught the last trace of sunlight, turning it to silver. The wind shifted, brushing my hair across my face, gentle and familiar, as if the world itself was agreeing. When I finally turned to leave, the night felt lighter, my steps unburdened. Behind me, the city glowed, distant, indifferent, and beautiful. Ahead, the path was dark but open. I walked into it without looking back.